I call this meeting of the Northeast Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present, that this meeting has been duly called, and that notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. The board will now adjourn into executive session pursuant to the following sections of the Texas Open Meetings Act. Texas Government Code, Section 551.071, private consultation with the board's attorney. 551.074, to discuss personnel or to hear complaints against personnel, and the time is 5:30. The board will now reconvene into open session, and the time is 6:16. On behalf of the trustees, I would like to welcome you to this evening's meeting of the Northeast Independent School Board. This is a business meeting of the board held in public. We appreciate your attendance and request your respectful attention. We welcome your comments during the Matters from the Floor section of the agenda. If you signed up to address a specific action agenda item, you will be called at that time. We wish to emphasize that this is a business meeting of the board, and while those in attendance may disagree about issues, it is our expectation that everyone will conduct themselves in a respectful and professional manner. Disruptions to this meeting by anyone will not be tolerated. In the event any person or group disrupts the meeting, a warning will be given to stop any disruptive behavior. Anyone persisting in disruptive behavior will be removed from the meeting. The board may also call a recess in the event of persistent disruption so that individuals who engage in disruptions can be removed. It is our intent to conduct the meeting in an orderly fashion. Finally, I would like to remind you that it is the mission of Northeast to challenge and encourage each student to achieve and demonstrate academic excellence, technical skills, and responsible citizenship. Item 5, Invocation and Pledge of Allegiance, Ed White Middle School. Mr. Ruiz.
Good evening, Madam President, board members, Dr. Micah, executive staff, and guests. My name is Fernando Ruiz, and I am the acting principal of Ed White Middle School and the director of the Design and Technology Academy at Ed White. Tonight it is my pleasure to introduce, on behalf of the faculty and staff at Ed White, two wonderful young ladies and their families. First, let me introduce Miss Analia de los Santos, who will be leading the invocation tonight. Analia is accompanied by her mother, Miss Jennifer Gonzalez, and her sister, Jaylee Gonzalez. Would you please stand? Analia is an 8th grader in our Ed White program of study. She is a member of the National Junior Honor Society and a student athlete who participates in track, volleyball, and basketball. Additionally, she is a junior student-to-student ambassador. It is also my pleasure to introduce Miss Brianni Morales, who will be reciting the Pledges of Allegiance tonight. Brianni is accompanied by her parents, Mrs. Genevieve Morales and Trooper Richard Morales. Would you all please stand? Brianni is an 8th grade student at the Design and Technology Academy at Ed White. She's a member of the National Junior Honor Society. She's also very active in the Data Coder Pals program, which is a unique partnership between Rackspace, Code Up, and Data that allows data students to partner with and mentor any ISD 5th graders in coding and digital design. Analia, at this time, would you please come forward and deliver the invocation?
Good evening, Dr. Micah, board members, and parents. Thank you for this great opportunity to speak with you today. Please bow your head and join me in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we are thankful that we are gathered here today. We ask that you give us the guidance, wisdom, and support to help us engage in ideas and allow us to grow closer as a district. Dear Lord, please help us make beneficial decisions for our staff and students. Thank you for this wonderful spring break we just had. As we go forward, please guide us and watch over us as we finish the school year. In your Son, Jesus' name, holy name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Analia. Brianni, would you please come forward and lead us in the pledges?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Analia and Brianni, would you please come forward? We have certificates for you, and we'd like to take your picture. Thank you both for being here. You both did a very nice job. Thank you again for being here. You're welcome to leave. I'm sure that you have other things that you need to do.
That are more fun.
Thank you so much. Item 6, recognitions. A, 2021-2022 TMEA All-State. Mr. Jimenez.
Thank you, President Grona, members of the board, Dr. Micah, executive staff, and guests. I'd like to call Ms. Julie Shore, Executive Director for Fine Arts, to the podium to address this agenda item. Let's hear.
Good evening. 41 Northeast students have been named to the TMEA Texas Music Educators Association All-State Ensemble. This is the highest honor that a Texas student can achieve in music. More than 60,000 students from across the state began their audition process in the fall of 2021. Only 1,700 students earned a chair in one of the TMEA All-State ensembles, with 41 of those coming from Northeast. Yay! Of the 41 students, 12 are band students, 21 are in the choir, and 8 are in the orchestra. These exemplary students experienced 3 days of intense rehearsals with world-renowned conductors, followed by a concert to thousands of music educators that attended the conference. The success of our music students is due primarily to the hard work and dedication of our Northeast music educators and the strong programs that they provide. Thank you to our directors for inspiring our students to achieve greatness, and congratulations to our very talented students. At this time, I would like to recognize these students and their directors. Matthew Blackwell, Johnson High School Band. Madison Bobrowski, Reagan Choir. Diego Camacho, Johnson Band. Andrew Chacon, Johnson Band. Caleb Comstock, Reagan Orchestra. Juliana Davidson, Reagan Choir. Shani Akaaki, Johnson Choir. Jacob Granderson, Johnson Choir. Zoe Guerra, Reagan Choir. Caitlin Hawkins, Johnson Band. Catherine Horton, Reagan Orchestra. Anna Housley, Reagan Choir. Olivia Irons, Johnson Choir. Zoe Kale, Johnson Choir. Zane Lihas, MacArthur Band. Christina Liu, Reagan Orchestra. Kenneth Lopez, Johnson Choir. Mateus Lucian, Johnson Band. Evan Martin, MacArthur Orchestra. Matthew Mojica, Reagan Choir. Maddox Mayan, Johnson Band. Mason Oberlin, Reagan Choir. Auburn Grace Pearson, Johnson Orchestra. Isabella Perez, Johnson Band. Ryan Post, Johnson Orchestra. Ana Rivera Fernandez, Reagan Choir. Joshua Shapiro, Reagan Orchestra. Casey Simonson, Reagan Choir. Sean Thornton, Reagan Choir. Jesse Vargas, Reagan Orchestra. Cameron Wasco, Johnson Band. I would also like to introduce these amazing directors. We'll start off with Dr. Jan Garvrick, MacArthur Orchestra, and Jordan Loveland, MacArthur Orchestra. Sixto Elizondo, Reagan Orchestra. Mary Cowart, Reagan Choir. Gavin McGee, Reagan Choir. Christy Brown, Johnson Choir. Ashley Hester, Johnson Choir. Hector Trevino, MacArthur Band. Jarrett Littman, Johnson Band. I'd also like to introduce Mr. Philip Flynn, our Director of Music Programs. And lastly, I would love to recognize our wonderful principals from these campuses that support our programs. Thank you so much, principals. So we would love for everyone to kind of gather in the center. We're going to take a picture. So parents, you're welcome to come up and snap pictures if you'd like. Squeeze in tight. I'll stand back here with Maya. Okay, parents, you can take one just a second. Parents, go for it. Anyone else? Wonderful. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for having us. We're going to go straight up this way.
Item B, UIL State Swim Meet. Mr. Jimenez.
Thank you, President Grona. I would like to now ask Kelly Parker, Executive Director for Athletics, to address this item. Here, okay.
Two weeks ago, the UIL held their swimming state meet and their wrestling state meet. And today we're proud to introduce some of these ladies and men who placed first, second, or third at the meet. First, from Johnson, we have Jada Scott, who got first place in the girls 100 freestyle, second place in the girls 200 individual medley, third place in the girls 200 medley relay, and third place in the girls 200 freestyle relay. Also from Johnson, we have Michelle Parsons. Michelle placed third in the girls 200 medley relay, third in the girls 200 freestyle relay. Also from Johnson, we have Elsa Musselman. Elsa placed third in the girls 200 medley relay and third in the girls 200 freestyle relay. And also from Johnson, Michaela Moore. Michaela placed third with the girls 200 medley relay and third with the girls 200 freestyle relay. And we have their coach, Mr. Coach Nelson. And those of you that, I'm sure you've heard by now, but Coach Nelson was last year's NFHS National High School Coach of the Year. So, from Churchill, we have Carly Cronk. Carly was third in the girls 200 freestyle. And her coach is with her, Coach Jedow. These are our medal winners at the 2022 UIL swim meet.
Item C, UIL State Wrestling. Mr. Jimenez.
Thank you, President Grona. Coach Parker will also address this agenda item.
This year we have two young men who placed in the top three. We'll start with Austin Hartman Gruber from Lee High School. Along with his coach, Coach Shoto. And from Johnson High School, we have Caleb Sebra, who was third place as well. Austin competed in the boys 160-pound division, and Caleb was in the boys 170-pound division. And this is Coach Miller.
Item 7, matters from the floor. The people that have signed up to speak to a specific agenda item, so we'll call them at that time. And then I'll read it at that time. Item 8, matters from executive session. A, personnel including but not limited to administrative appointments pursuant to Government Code Section 551.074. 1, possible action regarding routine personnel including but not limited to administrative appointments. A, Director of Records Management. Do I have a motion to approve as discussed in executive session?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Winkley. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Byer. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. Item 2, possible action regarding proposed recommendation for termination of Chapter 21 term contract employee. Do I have a motion to approve as discussed in executive session?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Hilliard. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Item 9, presentations. A, library update. Mr. Jarrett. We'll do presentation first and then the speaker.
Whichever you'd like to do, Madam President.
Yeah.
Do you want to do presentation first? Okay. So before Mr. Jarrett, before you take it over, I just want to clarify something for the board and for some folks. So because since this process started, you, I know as board members, and myself have heard from various community members about our review of the library books that are in our campus collections. And what I want to clarify for everyone this evening, for not just the board, but for our community, is that this administration did not challenge these books. There's always been a process whereby any person can challenge a book. And as you all know, you have a board policy that is EF local that sets forth that process. Our current review of books is not a challenge. Instead, the administration reviewed the books consistent with its duty to ensure that books are located in campus libraries where the content is age appropriate for the students that that school serves. We also reviewed books to make sure that the content wasn't outdated and needing replacement with more updated books on the very same topics. It is important to note that we are not reviewing books on the basis of viewpoints or ideas that are expressed within those books. All of this is consistent with existing board policy regarding the selection and the maintenance of instructional materials like library books. All right? Mm-hmm. So with that, Mr. Jarrett, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Micah, President Grona, members of the board, executive staff, and guests. I would like to ask Dr. Munoz to come forward to address this agenda item, and we will both kind of go back and forth as we go through the process of this presentation.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Micah, executive staff, and guests. Thank you. So tonight, as requested, we are going to give you an update for our library and what has come of this process. So the purpose behind our NEISD libraries is obviously to follow our Texas Education Code 31.002 under instructional materials. We are to also provide physical and intellectual access to information in a welcoming environment, provide instruction, learning strategies, and practice in using ideas and information for critical thinking, and to provide instructional resources that are educationally suitable. So how do librarians build their collections? To give context on how those collections are built, we look at TEKS alignment, we look at age appropriateness, current information, circulation, whether the books are getting checked out or not, physical condition, and student interest. So concerning our library update, what actions have occurred as a result of the initial book reviews? The number of titles that were identified were 432. Titles. Of those 432, 311 have remained on our shelves, 110 have been updated, and 11 have been moved. So some of the titles may have been reviewed and updated based at the campus level if they were identified as lost, had lack of circulation, or if they were in poor physical condition.
And just really quick, just to kind of put a little more context on that, the challenge in this whole process is that we also try to maintain the independence of each individual campus library because they represent the communities that they have. And so as we try to come up with a structure that allows for a consistent pattern, we also have to pay respect to the fact that some libraries may have books on the shelf that are not old and dated, thus not needing to be removed, but others may have to remove it. So it's a little challenging to create this in absolute numbers, but conceptually, this is how our research went about.
So the insight that we gained throughout this entire process, it was an arduous task, obviously, but looking at the additional librarian review, that aligned definitely to the content and validated its appropriateness for our shelves. We looked at library services and staff recommendations, and they aligned to and were supported by professional reviews, and these would be interfiled and flagged for an older audience. For those that were updated, they were updated due to poor professional reviews, lack of reviews, outdated content. They were also superseded by newer editions or more recently published book on the same subject, or they were superseded by a book with a more positive review on the same similar subject. So if they were reviewed, those are an example of what those, if they were moved, there are some examples there that are listed. If they were moved from elementary to middle or middle to high, and then based on the age appropriateness as indicated, those were strictly through professional reviews. And looking at our library services webpage, Jason, I don't know if we can click on that. So currently on our webpage, we do have the recommendations that were made by our library services department. It does state specifically if they were moved, if they remained on our shelves, if they were updated, and those were all recommendations that were given out to our librarians as well. So part of the continuous improvement process, if you want to go back to the presentation. So we're looking at continuously improving everything. And if you all recall, when we looked at our campus instructional improvement plan and our district instructional improvement plan, we used this as a framework to focus direction, cultivate collaborative cultures, secure accountability, and deepening learning. And then we also looked at how we're going to be able to apply this and create a very consistent and continuous improvement process. So looking at library services, how they've worked alongside librarians, they co-created a continuous improvement plan to build a robust and current collection for our students and our staff. So how are we going to continue to support this continuous improvement plan? We have refined the selection procedures. We're looking at a structured weeding schedule, and we are also enhancing reconsideration of this particular process. So parent partnerships are going to be super important and very critical in this process as well. So we are going to have the opportunity to participate in campus-based and district-based committees. We are going to have parents also access their student checkout history through Skyward, which is the platform where a parent has access to everything from grades to everything like that. And we're going to give them the opportunity through that platform. And then also the opportunity for them to opt out their child from accessing materials intended for an older audience. So this is an example of what a library checkout history will look like. So there under student, you would have the child's name, the ISBN, and the title. And then you would also have the date that it was checked out and the due date, and then the replacement cost if in case anything is lost. So a parent will have access to all this information, as I stated, through Skyward. So if we're going through further into the opt-out form, the parents can opt their child out from accessing materials intended for an older audience, as I had stated before. And the opt-out form will be accessible through Skyward Family Access, and they will have the opportunity to select if they do not want their child to have access to these library materials suited for an older audience, and they could opt out by checking a box. And we're going to have a variety of ways that that could be done. So going back to our focus and our framework, the key understandings that we walked away with were obviously that collaboration between librarians and library services is essential. The integration of professional learning communities will help support our librarians. We're going to look at careful consideration of books as identified as young adult or adult. That's going to be critical. Enhanced selection process ensures current and appropriate materials are on our shelves. We're going to foster a partnership with all stakeholders. That's going to be 100% necessary. We're looking at also a checkout history that would create a window for our parents to see into their child's interests. And we ultimately want to connect with both parents and students and help strike a balance between choice and partnership. So that sums up our update. Ms. Terry Sanchez and I are here to take any questions that you all may have.
Questions from board members?
I do have a question. Can you go back to the slide that showed the committees, the district and area committee, or yes, the campus-based and district-based committees? I just have a question. If this may be, I may be ahead of the game, and maybe something that you're still working out, but I'd like to know what that will look like, and how will you assure that there will be a balanced voice on these committees, not just at the campus level, but at the district level as well?
So in accordance with our policy, we currently have a very detailed policy when it comes to the selection process, if there's any challenges or anything like that. But we wanted to refine it a little bit more to be able to provide parents a platform to sign up for this campus-based committee. And then looking at those that come from, let's say, for example, a particular cluster, we are going to have a rotation between clusters for all of those people to be considered for a district-based committee. And that would be selected on a lottery process. So a couple of things that we want to be able to get our librarians out there to be able to provide them the opportunity to sign up. And then have our principal involved, our campus librarian, several teachers, and then to have a parent from the community.
So, and I would like to add something. So those two items solely for the purpose of a challenge.
Okay.
And the purpose of that is that if a book comes to a challenge and the librarian at that time says this book should stay on the shelf, and the parent still feels like this should not go on the shelf, then it will go to that campus-based committee. So that is a broader view and perspective, which includes a parent's voice. If that group agrees that this book should be removed, then it follows up to the district committee.
Okay.
The district committee's sole purpose is that once that book has been deemed necessary to be removed from one site, the district committee will review that to consider if it should be removed from all sites, which then that district committee will represent all the different schools in our whole entire district. Because what we don't want to have is a book that is inappropriate collectively at one campus, but leave it at another campus. But now we became aware, we would like the district committee to give it a review. If the district committee says, we believe the book should stay on the shelf, that site can still keep it off of theirs, but we've done our due diligence to make sure that we have all appropriate books on our campuses.
Okay, and I do like the fact that you are allowing for representation of communities. I think it's really important for students to be able to go into a library and to read books that are reflective of their culture
Absolutely.
and their heritage. And so I agree with that 100%.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Great
Yes, ma'am.
job.
Thanks for the update.
Any other questions?
I had a couple of questions. The Skyward, that's already live, correct? Or is
So
that already gone?
At this time, Terry? Yes, so the checkout history is
Okay.
currently live.
Okay.
There were some kinks involving this process because I think we're the first to implement it in Skyward. So we were actually able to get that out live. We just want to be able to provide that opt-out opportunity now, which is going to be the next layer of work.
And I know I had my, I guess, issues with back when we first discussed this about responding to this list of these particular books. I am glad to hear that we've learned some things through this process and
Absolutely.
how we can be better, how we can be more efficient. I know our librarians have a lot on their plates already. So it's good to always be thinking about how we can move forward in these situations. And with that, I guess, what is we've gotten through the 400, and I guess I thought it was 412 books, or 432 books. And we mentioned that we're now going to have more of a structured weeding process. What does that look like? Do we have a plan at this point? So that we're not just stopping with these books and saying, okay, now we're done.
No, go ahead.
So it's a pretty comprehensive plan. Library Services and the librarians co-created this plan, and we felt it was extremely important to have the campus as part of the process in developing how we move forward. And so one of the things that they embrace is this whole idea of a professional learning community at PLC, just like we do at our campuses, where they collectively work collaboratively to come up with the plan of action. And part of that is coming up with a schedule for weeding the books. part of the challenge that we run into is that there is always the possibility of turnover. Librarians leave, new ones come on board. And without a systemic process to ensure that the libraries are being weeded on a regular basis, essentially someone could inherit a library that is antiquated, outdated, and perhaps not relevant to the students that it serves. And so our attempt is really to create a place that is built and designed solely around kids and their needs and their interests. And so this weeding process will be systemically in place. So it's a continuous effort for us to grow our libraries to be a student center, because they're the nucleus of a school.
And I appreciate the comments made by Ms. Winkley and by you all as well, trying to keep the individual schools the flexibility, the ability to reflect what their community is. I think that's important. And I think we heard that from a lot of the people in our own community. That's a way to keep them involved, but also allow people access to things that they need. Thank you.
Ms. Williams.
Just for clarity, I guess. So I see we're on the example of library checkout history. And I know in these days, sometimes books are only online, but these are actual paper books. They're not online. And do the students usually take them home or just read them at school? I mean, I don't know how you would know.
So part of the instructional materials definition through the Texas Education Code is not necessarily just paperback books. It's anything that's also electronic, available through the web or through a platform. At this point in time, we're looking at what's currently physically on our shelves, and we're starting there, and then going through the weeding process with all other resources as well. And so it is, like I mentioned, a pretty arduous task, because there are a variety of platforms that you can access books from now. But the same will be for all resources that are currently housed in our libraries.
Okay. And that just came to mind because, of course, when I was in school a long time ago, I brought home library books. Mm-hmm. And that's how my parents saw what I was reading, by what I brought home. Same thing with my boys. I don't think everything was electronic at the time. They graduated 2009 and 2011, so when they brought home books, that's how I knew. I didn't go to a website or someplace to find that out. Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions? Okay, I'm going to read the matters from the floor, and then we'll call up number 1. The trustees welcome comments from members of the public. Generally, board members do not respond to public comments during the meeting, although members may request further information or a future agenda item on a matter raised during public comment. As explained fully in the board's written procedures, the matters from the floor portion is a limited public forum. Accordingly, speakers may present on a topic related to district business for up to 3 minutes, but are not permitted to make personal complaints about an individual staff or board member that should be raised using the district's grievance policies, a personnel action, a student disciplinary matter, a complaint about a particular student, or pending litigation. Any person who persists in speaking on these topics after being directed not to do so will lose the remainder of their time to speak and may lose their privilege of addressing the board at future meetings. We also welcome written comments at any time, either through mail at board@neisd.net or by mail, care of the superintendent's office at 8961 Tesoro Drive, 6th floor, San Antonio, Texas, 78217. Ms. Huey.
Number 1.
Hello, my name is Amy Senya. I am a former NEISD student, and reading books at NEISD libraries was foundational for my ability to go to college, for my ability to get my JD at Stanford Law School, and for my ability to work as I currently do as a civil rights lawyer. I specialize in First Amendment law. When I heard about the 414 books that NEISD had removed from the shelves, I returned to my NEISD community to investigate, to figure out what had gone on and people that had been affected by this decision. And what I learned was troubling. The decision by Dr. Micah and Mr. Jarrett to remove those books, even if it was temporary, was a violation of NAISD students' First Amendment rights. Schools, public schools in this country are not places of indoctrination. They're not places where the ideas that children can read about are determined by those people who are in power. And so I'm here today because not only am I concerned that that was a violation of the First Amendment, but I'm concerned about library services' current plan. And I'm concerned that those two implicate the First Amendment in troubling ways. First of all, I'm concerned that this was presented by library services as a presentation, not as an action item. I don't understand why the board doesn't get a vote and why the board doesn't get a say in how library services goes about this. I'm also concerned about the OA procedure. I'm concerned that by taking the Krause list, which district officials have admitted was politically motivated, and anyone who looks at the content of that list can tell the certain groups of people that were targeted by it, using that as a jumping off list to then have certain books be identified as for older audiences without any further explanation of what that means or what criteria will be used, stigmatizes not only those books, but the children that want to read them and identify with them. Some of the children that I spoke with, and I wrote it down because I wanted to get it just right, wanted to send the board this message. They wanted to tell the board that they felt discriminated against because the books were removed from the shelves. They felt betrayed. They felt that they were excluded by the very people that the board and the district was supposed to protect. And this part is a direct quote. "Stop trying to get rid of us. I'm not a freak. Don't erase me." As far as what you choose to do next, the community is watching.
Ma'am, that's your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I actually had follow-up if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
For the, I guess, first of all, with the website, thank you for publishing that list, what's happening with those books. I guess, what is the plan for that particular website going forward if books are challenged or something of that nature? Will that list on our website be continually updated?
So we wouldn't necessarily update it, all the books going forward into perpetuity. That book or list was created because it was of public interest. And because it became public interest, we want to maintain that transparency that we want to reflect our schools, to reflect our students. And so just for the purpose of providing an update to the board as well as to the public, is that list was published so people can see why a book may be considered as an update or moved to a certain grade level. But at no point in time did we want the public to believe that we would remove a book because we want to remove the voice or the image of a child, because our libraries is reflective of every single person that goes to our schools.
All I have.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry, I've jumped ahead. Item B, financial update, Mr. Villarreal.
Yes, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Mike, executive staff, and guests. I call on Susie Lackhorn, our Director of Budget and Financial Analysis. We're going to bring you a financial update. We have our board budget study sessions coming up in May. We have one in May 23rd, I believe, and then 2 in June with an adoption. So we just wanted to give a quick update as to where we stand financially. Susie.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Feels like I was just here, but a whole lot has happened in the time since we've been apart. So it's good to see you all. We're going to cover a variety of topics tonight, but just give you a brief update on what's been happening financially in the district. So we're going to talk a lot about COVID and how it's impacted different aspects of the district and financials. We're also going to spend some time on housing because it really helps to take a look at how the district is set up and housing and how that impacts important aspects of enrollment and things like that. And we'll end with a general fund forecast and start getting a preview for what those numbers look like for when we meet again in May. All right, so starting with COVID. Before we get into COVID costs, let's take a look at our history here with COVID. I almost ran out of room on the slide because COVID's been going on for so long now. The pandemic's over 2 years old, but this is our third fiscal year to see an impact from COVID. And so we're going to see impact to education in a lot of ways, changing how we educate, different financial things. And we're also going to see the impact from COVID for years to come for different reasons. And we'll get more into that. Just as a reminder, we shut down in spring of 2020. So at the end of that school year, kids finished remote. In 2021, we had a large percentage of our students learning remotely all year. 2021, there's too many 20s, so sorry. 21, 22 is our first year to have the majority of our students back on campus. And but we had a lot of impact from variants now. And let's take a look at how some of that has changed. Before we get too far into the new year, I want to take you back to where we were when we were adopting. So the last time I was here, I was sitting in this chair, and I was so optimistic. Everything was wonderful. You can see, this chart shows you new cases statewide by day. See the big blue arrow? That's when we adopted our budget. See how beautifully low those cases are? It was so lovely. And we were also seeing a really unique trend in that enrollment was increasing at the end of the year. For years, historically, our enrollment peaks in the fall, and then throughout the spring, we decrease some. But last year, we saw growth at the end of the year. So we were getting ESSER money, case counts were low, and students were coming back. It was very exciting and made me very happy. So what happened, not long after we adopted, Delta happened. So in between our budget adoption and the first day of school, we started seeing the Delta variant. So we have kids trying to enroll. At the same time, we're seeing a pretty significant spike. And then, once it finally settled down, right after the holidays, you can see this huge spike from Omicron. With these cases and the behaviors of our parents, we're going to see two major impacts to attendance and enrollment. So let's first look at attendance. All right, so of all the charts in tonight's presentation, this is the one that gives me the most heartburn. We've been historically pretty consistent with attendance rates in the district, so you can see what an outlier the green line is for the current year. And you definitely can see the impact. The Delta variant was in the first 6 weeks, and you can see normally our first 6 weeks is our highest attendance rate. But for 21-22, it got better once the Delta variant started slacking off. And the fourth 6 weeks, you can totally see the impact from Omicron. Bear in mind that we are not funded based off of direct enrollment. It's average daily attendance. And you've heard us talk about that during the budget, about WADA, which is weighted average daily attendance. But attendance is the driver for our funding. And about a 1%, so if we were to change from 95% to 94% attendance, that 1% swing will cost us roughly $4 million in revenue. So it's very important to get the kids here. On a plus note, we are seeing an improvement from this for 6 weeks. We don't have final for fifth yet, but already we can see a dramatic improvement. So there are reasons to be optimistic about some turnaround here. But as I learned in June, being optimistic doesn't always pan out real well. So we're going to be very cautious as we go forward. Now let's switch over to enrollment. This is our historical snapshots from the fall each year. And as you can see, back in 13-14, we peaked at about 68,000, and we've been declining ever since then. I've included 22-23's projection, so we're projecting to lose, another 1,000 students. But once again, like we saw last year, we had that unique thing where kids were coming later in the year and we were growing a little bit. We're seeing that again. So I'm going to say COVID's weird. I mean, it was already weird, but it's changing trends now. And so once again, we're seeing more students. We have more students right now than what that snapshot had. So we're just under 60,000 at the moment. And so will this trend continue? It's definitely something we'll be keeping an eye on. Once again, I don't want to get too optimistic because of what happened in June, but this is definitely something that we're seeing COVID impact in multiple ways. Now, just because we're seeing a decline in our total enrollment doesn't mean that our individual populations are seeing the same thing. So this chart plots the change in economically disadvantaged students and our change in total enrollment from 2014-15 to 2021-22. And as you can see, we grouped it by cluster, and a lot of clusters are seeing significant increases in our economically disadvantaged student population, while their total population is decreasing. Now let's look at the district as a whole. So Northeast is the blue bar and the state average is the orange bar. And as you can see, we've been consistently increasing in our economically disadvantaged student population. Since 17-18 was roughly 46%, and now we're just under 60% for 21-22. But at the same time, the state average has been relatively stable. We don't have the new number for 21-22 for the state average. Those haven't been released yet. We know our number, but not the state's. But if it holds to the same trend, we will look very similar to the state numbers.
Ms. Lackhorn, may I interrupt you there?
Of course.
So this is something that I alluded to, I believe, the last board meeting. I'm not optimistic that you're going to see a spike or a rise at the state level. And the reason I say that is I have asked colleagues locally and across the state, have they seen this increase like we have? Their answer is, what are you talking about? You've seen an increase. This is very unique from what I can tell now. Have I talked to 1,000 superintendents? Absolutely not. But I've probably talked to 15. None of them have seen a change like we have. Now, of course, you may come to the conclusion, like, why? I don't know. None of us know. I mean, we've talked and bantered back and forth on what it could be. Anecdotally, what you hear from principals are, through the pandemic, one of the parents lost their jobs, the other, and they bought a house in a certain location and they want to stay there. And they're going to do what they can to make it work. The thing, and they expressed it. I'm thinking of one principal in particular. The parents like, we're doing everything we can to stay here because we bought this house to go to these schools. We're just hoping we can do it long enough, and that's the piece, right? So I think there's some of that going on. These are the things that, if you'll recall, when COVID hit, we started talking about what are going to be these long-term repercussions, right? This is pretty interesting. I mean, this is the first time we've ever, as a school district, crossed the 50% threshold for economically disadvantaged. And Susie, I think we're almost 59. Is that correct?
Yes, we're just under 60%, like 59.2.
So that's pretty significant, especially when you look back in time now. I think it was in '95. I think we were around 25% or 24%. So that's a pretty big shift. Sorry, go ahead, Susie.
It's okay. now that we've talked about some of the impact we think the pandemic's having on our demographics, let's just talk about straight up numbers. So since the start of the COVID pandemic, we started doing what we can to track our costs. And so we can't capture everything because every transaction, some transactions are kind of COVID, kind of not. So, but we've done the best that we can and tracking them. And so throughout the entire 3 fiscal years, we've spent roughly $6.9 million on costs related to COVID that we can identify. 3.7, so over half, is directly related to technology purchases and repairs for technology. Now, on the good news for this, we've also received $2.5 million in reimbursements from different federal programs for that technology. We also had some premium pay during the shutdown for different services we continued to provide during the pandemic. We have other pay, so like subs. We hired temps for testing and tracing during this time period. We've printed things. We've had PPE purchases. We had some PPE given to us, but we've also had to purchase our own. So this doesn't include things like food service because they have their own reimbursements and those like this. This is just some of the costs that we've incurred outside of that. We didn't include unemployment because it's got credits and different changes like that. So, you know, these are, again, in line with the cost that we're paying throughout since March of 20. We didn't include losses of different types of revenue like facility rentals, and these are truly costs. But we have received $2.5 million. We have a new program to receive another $6 million in reimbursements for Chromebooks. And this is the Emergency Connectivity Fund through the FCC. So we haven't spent that yet, so it's not in our chart, but we'll be able to buy more Chromebooks soon with those funds. And you know, as you can see, this is a very real financial impact to the district. This is money that we had to spend in order to safely open and do the things we needed to fight the pandemic. All right. So, moving on to housing. These two topics are kind of unique, but we were giving you a nice brief overview. So, housing is very interesting in the district. Now, you see some of these stats every year whenever we're talking about property values as we're setting up the budget. But this one is, I think, important to point out regularly because we are seeing single-family homes. They're still our biggest percentage, but they're not as big of a percentage as they used to be. So over the last few years, we've seen the growth happen in multifamily and commercial, not necessarily in single-family homes. We're also seeing the occupants in the district not have children, school-aged children anymore. So the percentage is increasing there. So in 2010, we had over 65% of our housing was occupied by people without school-aged children. Now we're looking at 72%. So we're having fewer and fewer school-aged parents within the district. Okay? And now let's take a look at those single-family homes and their additions to our property values. As you can see, back in the 90s through early 2000s or mid-2000s, we were really growing new homes at a very quick pace. We were also adding kids to our enrollment very quickly there. And then in 2007, 2008, we saw a sharp decline. And now our new home growth has really kind of flattened out. And this really just shows us how close we are to being built out. There aren't as many big lots available for developers to come in and build new homes. And so, but those new homes, those new communities, those are the things that attract young families, you know, for their starter homes and such. And so we're starting to see this flattening of these single family homes being built in the district. Our population kind of reflects that too. So this is our census data. And as you can see, from 1990 to 2000, we had nearly 20% growth in our population. And then from 2000 to 2010, we saw another 20% growth in the population. But from 2010 to 2020, it was only 8% growth. So the boundaries are just such that there's not enough places to keep building. Now, at the same time, so now we don't have as many opportunities for new homes to be built. We're also seeing some unique things with the values of the existing homes. So to compare things across the district, we took a sample of homes by cluster. Now, this is not a scientific sampling. The samples were selected to be representative across the district so that we got homes from every cluster. But as you can see, our older communities at Legacy and Roosevelt had a growth in value of over 60%. But when you look at their sales prices for those homes have grown by 87%. So this is from 2011 to 2019. That's a huge increase, especially when you consider that older homes will have higher investment needs, repairs, and those kinds of things. So these kinds of homes are not necessarily all that appealing to young families, either. So we're losing opportunities with new homes as we're built out, and our older homes are becoming more expensive at the same time. All right, so kind of a sidebar, but related to housing. We wanted you to be aware, because you may start hearing about it more and more as we get closer to the May elections. Senate Bill 1, in the third special session, included an increase to the homestead exemption from $25,000 to $40,000. But it has to be approved by the voters through Proposition 2. So it's on Proposition 2 for the May election. The good news for us is that hold harmless was included in the bill, so we're not really going to see an impact. So we should be fine. So we just want you to be aware that when you hear people talking about that an increase in the homestead exemption, it really shouldn't change our revenue structure, as we'll be receiving hold harmless to make up for it. All right, so let's move on to the general fund forecast. We had a significant event last year. It just seems like plenty of significant, unique events happening throughout, impacting our financials. Winter Storm Uri was one of them. Good news on this is that we've recouped just about all the cost. We estimated about $2 million. We've received, just in January, about $1.5 million from our insurance. We expect another $300,000 later in the year. And FEMA even gave us $75,000 of our deductible back. Now, we will see, potential increases in utilities as the utility companies come back to recoup some of their costs. So we can definitely see an impact from Winter Storm Uri in future years from that, but at least the repairs and damages were all basically reimbursed to the district. All right, so last year we were adopting the budget, and we were just getting word about ESSER 3. We hadn't heard much about ESSER 2. Don't ask me why things are out of order. And ESSER 1 was wrapping up. Just to recap, ESSER 1, we received about $10.5 million, but the state supplanted the whole thing. And for those of you who were here for the whole thing, it was painful to talk about. So 1920s general fund revenue, the state gave us $10.5 million less than what they would have. And they gave us the ESSER money instead. And then in 2021, we moved costs from the general fund that normally would have been paid from there into that ESSER fund to offset that revenue that they give us. So they were making us whole by doing that, but it spanned 2 fiscal years and was just weird. But it's done now. So 2021 was the last we would have seen anything from ESSER 1. So now we have ESSER 2 and ESSER 3. ESSER 2, The district was allocated 52 million, but the state supplanted about 8.6. So we'll really get 43 and a half or so where they didn't take revenue away from us. And then ESSER 3, they didn't supplant at all, so we'll receive that 117 million for that. Now, the impact to the general fund, we will be recoding costs to ESSER 2 and 3 through most of the end of 23, fiscal 23. Some stuff may make it into 23, 24. We have until September 30th, 2024 to spend everything, but primarily you'll see the impact through this year and next year.
Right, and Susie, let me just interrupt there.
Yeah.
I just want everybody to remember this is one-time money. This isn't ongoing. And you know, we've talked so much, and Dan, you're going to have to remind me, it was in 07 or 09? 09. 09, this similar type of thing happened. And we got a large influx of federal dollars in, and then there was a fiscal cliff. What we're making sure to do is to make that there is no fiscal cliff that's coming to us. So, go ahead, Susie.
Okay. So let's take a look at our numbers. Remember in June, I just keep referring back to June because it was such a wonderful time. We didn't have stuff from ESSER yet. We didn't have details. It was just rolling out. So we had you adopt a budget that had no impact from ESSER whatsoever because we just didn't know what would happen. So you adopted a budget with a decrease to fund balance of about 25 million. But again, that is assuming everything gets spent everywhere. And we were really projecting about a loss of about 10 million, right? So now you can see we have estimated the impact of ESSER for 21-22. So instead of a $10 million loss, we're really projecting to add money to fund balance this year as we shift some costs over to the ESSER programs. This will also happen in 22-23, and we'll add more money to fund balance. Before I move too much further, let's do a couple of disclaimers here. We're not including increases for compensation or health insurance in these. We have a legislative session in 23, and who knows if any impact there will be to us, but that is always a possible game changer. And
Ms. Lackhorn, there's always an impact to us in a legislative session. I mean,
thank you, yes.
Every legislative session we have impacts. It's just how much and
How
financially will there be any requirements for us to do another unfunded mandate of some form?
We're also projecting enrollment losses to continue, and since our attendance numbers this year are scary, we have a conservative estimate for attendance in there. And so, you know, don't be surprised if, as things are turning around attendance-wise, as we may be more slightly optimistic on the revenue side here. So these numbers may improve, is what I'm trying to say, as that gets better. But as soon as I say that, I may jinx the world and a new variant may show up, and so I don't want anybody to take that at complete faith. So there's a lot missing or not included in these forecasts, and we're going down the road quite a ways. So, but you can see here, we're adding to fund balance in 21-22. We're adding to fund balance in 22-23. But then when we get to 23-24, we're not really shifting cost over to ESSER anymore. And this is where we start projecting losses again. Now, on the plus side, we're building that fund balance. And even through 24-25, with these decreases, you're still, as you can see, well over 3 months of fund balance. And I should say, the one thing that we also don't have included are our cost-saving measures that we're currently working on for the future. So 23-24 doesn't have any raises or health insurance adjustments, but it also, our forecast at this moment doesn't include those cost-saving measures that we will have implemented at that point in time. ESSER does some really nice things for us. When the state was taking money away from us, it filled the hole. So when they took the $10.5 million away from us in revenue, in ESSER 1, they took it away from their bucket and gave it to us in ESSER. So it filled that hole. And they did that same thing in ESSER 2 for $8 million. ESSER also bought us time to look at our cost structure and to develop a better plan for developing any changes that we need to make in the future. And so we get to add money to fund balance for the next 2 years, and then it helps us position ourselves for 2020, 23, 24, and 24, 25 better.
Right. So Susie, let me, because there are some things missing. I want you all to know that one of the things that is going on, Deb, are you out there? Yeah. That we've heard is some form of, so let me back up to Susie's slide. You don't have to back up, Susie, but where it talks about our attendance rate. Can you go back, if you don't mind?
Don't mind at all. Oops.
Yep, there you go. That looks horrible, y'all. I mean, certainly everybody can agree. That's actually really good compared to a lot of districts locally. There are some districts that are in the 80s. There are districts in the state that are like at 80, almost 79. Like it is truly. So so I'm not saying this is good, because it's not. What I am saying though is because statewide there was a pretty significant impact, in addition to enrollment and pieces like that, that there is some pretty significant talks now at the state. Deb, I'm looking at you, so correct me if I say it wrong. There is some pretty significant talks, and seems like some positive momentum that there is some sort of assistance that's going to come to districts across the state. I don't believe for the entire year, but really looking, because if you looked at those slides where Susie explained, as variants hit, the impact that it had on enrollment and attendance, is that happened across the state. So they're looking, I believe, at the first 4-6 weeks. Is it the whole year? 18-19. No, but I'm saying looking at assistance, they're looking at those numbers, but the first 4-6 weeks of this school year actually helping us financially using our 18-19 numbers. Does that make sense? So it's backing up and looking at those attendance rates and those types of things and applying it to this school year. So with that, you can fast forward now, Susie, to your slide. With that, I'm just saying is that I'm cautiously optimistic we're going to see some help yet. So these numbers could very well improve.
And Dr. Micah, usually when you go out 3 years down the road, I mean, you got to take those numbers with a grain of salt, because like 3 years ago, we were talking about recapture. So things change. So, I mean, going into a legislative session, who knows what the 23-24 is going to show. I mean, it's so volatile that we have to be careful not to hang our hat on that.
And y'all, again, we talk a lot among ourselves. This is a pretty good forecast. I mean, this is pretty good. There are districts locally that are like tens of millions in the hole, based on what's been going on. So this is positive. While it's not positive, it's positive. But it's to help you all kind of start to think about. I know as you all worked through a draft of a strategic plan, you talked about stewardship, right? So when we really took that and started to talk this through and wanted to bring you something now, just to start you thinking about that budget season, these numbers will change, right, Susie?
They probably changed in between coming downstairs.
Well,
to
honestly,
here.
when I looked at them, I was like, hey, that actually looks better than the last time I saw it. So, these things continue to fluctuate, right? But it's important for us to at least give you sort of our best estimate at this moment in time.
Okay. Well, now,
Thank you, Sue.
So some of the key takeaways, COVID continues to impact enrollment and attendance. The good thing about it is we don't see any variance down the road. And, like our test sites are really low, our numbers are low, people calling in as far as cases, so that's a good trend. The trend of decreasing enrollment year to year, you saw that, we were at a peak of 2014, and every year we're losing 1,000, 1,500. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Dan, let me jump in on that.
Yes.
Y'all, I want to thank our performance and planning department for what they're trying. So, and you know this, Anthony. I was over top of them for 2 years as the assistant superintendent. And I will tell you, when Susie showed you all the attendance rates, the daily attendance per 6 weeks, that's really how enrollment was. I mean, it was pretty predictable. It is anything but predictable now. When we look at that number, we could lose 1,000. We could gain 500. You could gain 1,000. Nobody really knows. But what we don't want to do is go into, like Susie showed you, this very rosy, optimistic piece, and then go, oops, we were too optimistic. And so it's extremely difficult right now for them to predict, because every indicator that we've always utilized in order to do it just isn't there anymore. They're just, it's not predictable anymore. Because things like home values and, new homes and choice and, all of those things are coming into play now. It's not, we often try to think about it as a single causation. I don't believe anything's a single causation. I think multi-causation is the answer. And I think when we look at enrollment, it's a lot of different factors at play. I think our average home in our Northeast Independent School District stands around 287,000.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I'm looking at the smarter people out there. Yep.
287.1.
287, y'all. That's really expensive, and that's not going to get you a brand new home. It's just not. And they keep going up. So there's just, for a young family, that's tough. And look, as you see that number increasing with single-family homes that don't have kids, I mean, my wife and I talked about it. That's going to be us soon. And we're not moving. People move in and don't want to leave. Northeast is a good place to live. And so as that happens, Karen and I are just not going to give any more children to the Northeast School District. So that's just going to be one more home that adds into it. Dan, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. So economically disadvantaged student population is near state average, and that's increasing. But we saw a trend all across the district. So that was pretty eye-opening that, it's happening not just in certain areas, but across the district. The district housing growth has slowed, but housing prices are increasing. 4 years ago, I want to say we were at an average of 224. Maybe 2 years before that, we were 185. So it's just getting higher and higher. There's some new tracks, like they'll find a piece of land and they'll put 20 houses in there. So there's some tracks around Madison that I noticed, and it was like from the 250s. I just drove by the other day and they changed the sign from the 350s. So even that is like, wow. I mean, within 2 months, they just jacked up. So anyway, it's just the housing is going to become I think more of an issue for us because of the cost and how much it's going up. And you saw some of those areas where like the Legacy cluster, the Roseville cluster. I mean, the prices that they're starting to charge for some of those homes is astronomical. So, I mean, who's going to be able to afford those homes? So, the homestead exemption is not going to hurt us in any way because, we get more from the state if we go further down on our property values, but that's not happening. And then ESSER will provide relief to the general fund for the next 2 years. So, I mean, that is a big help. I think we're bringing a ESSER update maybe next month or the month after. With that, if you all have any questions.
I do have a question regarding the, first of all, thank you. Very informative. And, because we've been on the board through COVID and you have always given us an update, I knew what our costs had been related to COVID, but to see them on paper all together is a bit overwhelming, particularly when you realize, you have a total of 6.9 and you've only received 2.5. Like, that's a 4.4 variance. So I hope those Chromebooks come for our students. But will you go back to the slide where it shows thank you, socio disadvantaged.
One of
Here
these.
we go. Economically disadvantaged. Sorry about that.
This one?
Next, the previous. And so when we're looking by cluster, and so the first thing that came to my mind, Dr. Micah, was our students in regard to lunch and to breakfast. And, most of our campuses that are enrolled in the program where it is, where lunch, all meals rather, are free, are not necessarily north of 1604. And so what are we doing to assure that those families that are north of 1604 are fed?
Yeah. Well, so just know, right, this year, and since really COVID began, everybody can eat free right now.
Yeah.
So the piece is, right now, we're okay. There is, though, Deb or Susie, there is at the state or the federal level now that this is going to expire, I believe is what I read. So the question becomes, so if it expires, which it probably will for next year, Dr. Mitchell and Ms. Glosson are going to have to look at the CEP program and then figure out if it can expand, where it can expand, and how we do that. Because that's I think the piece, Ms. Winkley, that people think families that are struggling are living in certain areas in the district, and they're everywhere. That was for us when our numbers came in and we saw almost 60%. I can remember Mr. Villarreal was like, hold on, we crossed 50%. And yeah, I mean, it grew that rapidly, that quickly. That was a shocker for us. So we have to look at services across the district and making certain that availability isn't just by a zip code, that it's everywhere, because the need is everywhere.
Okay. Any other questions or?
Just had one question. I know we're gonna get deeper into this, but for the ESSER funds, they're not gonna pull back for the next 2 years. That 117.1 million is coming allocated and will be part. Y'all will figure out the math of the general fund. The out years that obviously we're gonna see some variation, but those numbers, we're not gonna see some planting or pullback, I guess. They're not gonna try and claw any money back as far as the program is written as of right now.
I cannot say what the state will do.
As of right now.
As of right now,
We have no
it's ours.
reason to believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
As of right now,
Because I
that's
know
allocated to us.
it'll
That
stay in our
is
budget.
correct.
And there hasn't been
That
any
is correct.
talk that we know of. We haven't heard anything
Yeah.
that
And then
they are
the-
thinking of taking something.
In the out years, no federal money is assumed. It's just the normal
Right.
budgeting process.
Yep.
Okay, that's it.
Correct. That is correct. Yes, sir.
Just wanted to make sure. I figure
Yep.
we'll get to this more next
Yeah.
month. Thank you.
And I just have a couple of basic questions. On that slide that you had up before, there was not a blue bar, if you will, for Reagan and Madison. So I'm assuming that's because there was no change in economic disadvantage. I'm sorry.
So it was.
I'm sorry.
For
The,
total, like for Reagan, you can see there, like their change in enrollment was
The change
basically
in-
flat. And so the number is there, but it is too tiny to make it onto the chart.
Okay, so and then that was MacArthur that didn't have a change.
Yep. So it stayed, both of those are relatively flat.
Okay. And then on the, I think the next slide after that, we're showing high economic development student population versus the total. And I think that maybe one of the reasons is because maybe some of the households were reclassified. If a parent lost a job or if their income went down, did that reclassify them into an economic disadvantage category?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. You know, this year we got a little bit more aggressive as to trying to collect the paperwork We had a new program in place to folks who went to check on grades and things of that type. They had to go and fill out that form, because before we used to send the forms and just keep bugging people, hey, you got to submit it, you got to submit it, you got to submit it. This year we were a little bit aggressive, and we changed kind of the way we were doing it. So once we did that, that kind of changed those numbers. So in the past, we kind of let parents, taking the paperwork home, saying, and in the last 2 years before this year with COVID, it just, there was a lot of lost paperwork. Some didn't do it, some did it. So I'm thinking that in the last 3 years, maybe our numbers were already going up higher. We were just not getting that information in.
So they were already there.
Yeah.
And we just didn't know.
I think, right. And I think the thing is here, again, I'll go back to that anecdotal story I told you. That family may have classified, because there are, 3 different levels for low socioeconomic. Like there's different ways that you can classify. It's partial, it's so forth, right? The thing is that family may have qualified low socioeconomic. However, they just didn't apply for it. But once you lose a job, once things start, all of a sudden now the need becomes a little bit greater, and now you're going to look for other avenues to make that difference up. Because what was interesting is we kind of feared with free lunches that people wouldn't do it at all. And in fact, we got the reverse, which are people filled it out, because it did give them, what was the, Sharon, are you in here? No. I don't remember the program. It was something with, no. It was a program last summer that if they were on a free or reduced lunch, that they could PB something. PEBT, that they qualified and then got things through the summer. So you saw a lot of people applying for those different varied federal programs because of circumstances have changed. Now they need to. They may have not needed to quite as much as once some things changed.
And that was in addition to better data collection as well.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
So I guess I'm trying to, in the overall scheme of what we're discussing, trying to find the correlation. What are we looking at with economically disadvantaged student population versus funding?
Finances.
And are there, because of that increase, are there ways through other federal programs that might be able to be offset, or is it just more of a expense on our part, or is it an expense on our part?
Part of our state funding is based off of our economically disadvantaged students.
Right.
So this increase will get us more state revenue, and so that comes with strings attached to it.
Sure.
And so we have to spend it on at-risk students. So it's not anything that we can do whatever we want to with it. But the state does fund us, specifically for economically disadvantaged students based off of how many we have.
Right. That comes back to WADA.
Right.
So,
and it's all weighted. We get different weights on it.
Right. That's from House Bill 3, was it, where they had all the different
The concept's been
matrix
around
stuff.
for a long time. House Bill 3 changed how it was done.
Right.
But they've been funding, the program's called State Comp Ed.
Okay.
And so that program's been around. They modified it with HB 3, but the state gives us, part of our revenue is to help those students.
And I guess related to that, when we're talking about the real estate market, and I actually listened to a presentation a couple of months ago. If anybody want to look it up, it's the Urban Land Institute, and they do a yearly real estate forecast, and things are just going to keep going up.
And their
people
appraisal.
are coming from Austin and now coming to San Antonio, and
And you're getting a lot of investors. I mean, that's the thing. A lot of these homes are going to investors, and that's where they're putting their money. So, but just to reiterate, Bear Appraisal District sets the values of homes.
Not us.
And to that point, though, I mean, I know some realtor friends. The problem, and Mr. Byer, you're alluding to it, is supply and demand.
Correct.
And there aren't as many homes as there are people wanting. And so I bet you twice a month I have some realtor that contacts me either from a phone, calls me, or sends me an email about, hey, have you thought about, or sends me something in the mail. Hey, do you want to sell your home? I just looked. It's not just you. You know, like, hey, would you sell your house? Hey, we think you could get this much for it. Because they just don't have, and it just keeps going up.
Well, in the last 2 to 3, maybe 3 years ago now, we made a conscious effort to reach out to some of those real estate organization professionals. Are we staying in contact with them and trying to keep tabs on that? For
Yes,
the
sir.
different areas
That
are
would
growing?
be our executive director for external relations that's sitting right out there. She does contact and stay in touch with Sabre.
Okay,
Yes,
great.
sir.
Good.
I've sold 3 houses and they weren't even mine.
Oh. Okay, anything else? Any other questions? Great presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you for bringing this to us. All right, item 10, new business for possible board action. A, board policy 1, possible action regarding board policy update 118, second and final reading. Dr. Micah.
Yes, so thank you, Madam President. If you'll remember, we brought this to you all last month, and this is, staff is here should you have any other questions.
Okay, and we had one person who wanted to speak.
And that's right. Do you want to let them speak first, and then I've got to ask Mr. Piercello to clarify something for y'all based off a question. So you
Okay.
can have them speak first.
Sure. Go ahead, Sandy.
Number 2. Trying to get to my clock, sorry.
President Brown and members of the board, Dr. Micah. My name is Nancy Esquan, and I'm representing Northeast AFT.
Mr. Piercello, the question has arisen on several different occasions. I think Ms. Huey brought it up, or maybe Mr. Byer, about the striking of designee. And so Mr. Piercello, I know, reached out, and you have an answer to that, correct?
Yes, sir. So the issue here was previously our policy stated that the superintendent or designee could accept contract employee resignation. And essentially, that's in conflict with the law, because what the law says is that it has to be the board or its designee. Okay, so the statute, I mean, our policy already states that the superintendent can accept resignations, but the superintendent cannot then go and designate someone else. You all have to. So he's a busy person. I've heard. And so he needs someone else to be able to accept those resignations on his behalf. So that's why we have shifted that to the executive director for human resources, who, that is, that's her responsibility anyways. She is the one that accepts those. So we are including that position as a designee directly in policy, so that it doesn't fall on the superintendent, and we're in compliance. That's essentially
And related to that, I
Yes.
guess, we have duplicate copies, or at least in my packet.
Yes.
So
And it says two different things on DFE.
So the one that you'll be accepting is the one on page 60. It has the highlighting, and the highlighting is what we added. The TASB recommendation was to include language, other person designated by board action. We decided to make it direct in the policy, executive director for human resources. We could have taken it as a resolution that would also require board action, but then that requires you to go to two separate places in the policy to figure out who the designee is, and this is just cleaner and more direct.
Okay. Questions?
Could we get a follow-up on our speaker's comment? It's on page 14 about striking. I had already made a note of that, too.
I think you had brought it up last month.
I brought it up, yeah, last time. I questioned it last time. So could you review your response on that?
Review your response, and then do you have any history or background on as to why they would have removed that from a principal qualification?
Now, this is something that we can always put in a job description without it being in policy. So if we want that to be a requirement, we can still require it. I believe TASB removed it because they felt like this is not something that's required to be in policy. This is really an administrative decision that we can make as we go along. We can require more, we can require less, but we can still require 3 years in our job descriptions if that's what.
Right. And I just said it to them, so I want to say it for everyone. I would form this through strategic versus tactical. Is what they're saying is, as a board, that's getting into the tactical piece of the administration's role of doing. We can do that on our own. We don't need the board to start listing the requirements for it. Does that make sense? Because now you're starting to get into the administration's piece of. So, look, I don't have any inclination today or any time while I'm around to say that you can go be a principal minus teaching. So as far as our job descriptions go, they're always going to have it in there. That's just going to be a requirement.
Is that listed in the current job description, as one of the requirements?
I believe so.
I just
but
want to assure that the language is in there,
Ms.
and we're
Witten
not voting on
can do
something
it.
that, and we're speculating.
Yes, currently in all of our principal job descriptions, we require 3 years of experience in teaching. So it is presently stated, yes.
Okay.
So as far as the policy is concerned, it could be also be covered under other qualifications deemed necessary by the board, correct?
And included in the job description, I'm sorry.
And included
in the job description. And that's where the job description would come in, saying necessary to have 3 years of classroom
and
experience before you can become a principal at Northeast, or before you can apply to be a principal at Northeast Independent School District.
Yes.
Okay.
TASB's goal was to just streamline it, and also, for what Dr. Mike said, to remove that because that's more strategic, and to
Okay.
allow us that ability to reflect it in our job descriptions.
Okay. Other questions?
Thank you.
I have two other follow-ups from last time. On the CFT local, I know we had talked about, Mr. Villarreal talked about the possible reporting practices, the current data of those clubs, organizations, just getting that out to the parents and community with current data to not create additional work, but provide that next layer of communication. Did you have a chance to look at that?
Yes, sir. I call on Susie Lackhorn. We kind of talked, and she had talked to Lisa Shoesmith, our internal auditor, director of internal audit, and she's got some words.
So our student and campus activity fund system is, doesn't have a great repository of data in it. To pull data out of it, you're going to get very basic information.
I know.
Check number, check amount, and vendor name. And to get it, it's a cloud-based system, so you're going to kick off a report, and then you have to download it, and then in Excel. And so our sponsors, we've got over 1,500 sponsors. We have hundreds of accounts at high schools and thousands of accounts throughout the district. And so for our sponsors or our bookkeepers to be able to kick off those reports, download them, format them so that they're readable, with just that limited information, it would create hours of work. And so and then when you take it from the campuses and you move it to central office, then you magnify it times 65, right? And so we don't have a system that is automated enough to create something for us without creating a lot of man hours to be able to push that data out. And the data that we have in the system, we basically store all the detail in our data storage system that describes what or has the invoice, describes the transaction. But the reporting and the system that creates the check is really just flat information that doesn't paint any kind of useful picture. It's just, like I said, it's check number, amount, and name. That's it. And so we don't have a way at this time where we can create any efficiency without having to go to like our MIS department and write something new that could combine that in order to keep from burdening any of our staff with hours upon hours of extra work.
So there's no way to print a general ledger of that particular line item that
Yes,
just
ma'am.
would give,
Yep.
the first quarter monthly
Yes,
report.
we can do that, but it might just say, I don't know, Maria's Tortillas.
Right.
It's not going to tell
It
you.
doesn't give you the memo.
Right,
is
doesn't
why
give you, right.
that-
I mean, what we paid for it, yeah, we can scrub that, because there's a lot of detail in this report. It just doesn't give you the invoice. It doesn't tell you, what was it bought for. If they bought Office Depot, $300. It's not going to give you the breakdown that maybe $50 was paper, 20 was toner, things of that type. We don't have the detail in this system. Check register, yeah, because, we do that for general fund. We put out our check registers. So, it's possible to do that, but it's just going to show a bunch of checks
Date,
without.
check number,
Right. And it's not going to really
And Ms.
attach.
Winkley,
Yeah.
my concern there, and I'll just be quite blunt, I don't want my band director worried about answering a question from a check register.
Well, and
I want
I-
them focused on kids
And I understand that.
doing.
I do.
And so, when we looked at it, they really did take a hard look at, can we produce something? And I'm going to take you back to what I said during strategic planning. Sometimes you can be transparent, not be transparent.
Right.
And I'm afraid this isn't going to, I fashion it when they were explaining this to me, like consent items.
Well,
and you guys always have, even though we've tried to make some changes to it.
I think that
and-
in brilliant changes, they
Yeah,
explain a lot.
and it's
They
fine.
do.
But even there, right, it still doesn't give you the specificity that you're looking for. So then the question becomes, all right, so I've now pulled up a check and I want to ask Maria's Tacos, why did we spend $500 there? That's not going to be easily answered.
No, and I guess my point was not to have them under microscope, because I understand. And actually, Mr. Hilliard, my question was to you, because I'm watching the meeting. I did not attend that meeting, and I'm yelling at the screen like trying to give an answer. Pull a GL, just pull a GL. Give your dates, the payee, the amount. It's so easy because I'm thinking QuickBooks and all these systems that are utilized for finance is not recognizing it's a broader system. But what worried me about the process as well, because in the policy there states that there's oversight. It's not just that sponsor, that there's oversight. But then you made a comment that alluded to a parent being able to dictate how those funds were spent.
If
Or
that's what you
question
heard,
how the funds
no,
were
I guess they
spent.
do have information on it, especially we talked at some point to the larger organizations, because a smaller organization, the fishing club that has 3 people, different conversation, but the large organizations that have a sponsor, so they have the general idea, and I'm not talking about check registers, we spent $5,000 on new equipment or new uniforms, so that it's that communication with the parents as they're fundraising and contributing to this. They have that communication with their direct kids activity as they're asking family and friends for money was my general stuff. I realize there's accounting mechanism, but this is building that communication with the community and family members, and parents can go ask. I think some parents may be hesitant to do because they worry how that person may look at their kid. And I just, for the larger organizations, they might go, why are you asking about how we're spending our money and pick an activity? And so just a way to, people can go, hey, what do we do with all that money? Because sometimes people don't really know. Parents don't know. The average parent doesn't know what's going on with the funds that come in. And it's not questions doing motives or material. It's just that openness to the parents who are our educational, customer. Quite at the end of the day, they're the ones who provide their kids and students to us.
I guess I would just, I would assume that everybody would just ask. It's not, you're not going to be turned away. In your community, you will not be turned away. If you ask, where did the funds go that we used for this fundraiser? And Ms. Shore, I see you nodding your head because your organizations, your spirit organizations, fine art organizations, do a lot of fundraising. And there are questions, and parents do want to know. And usually the fundraiser, when it's specific, is attached to, we need uniforms, we need supplies, we need a choreographer. And so I guess I just wanted to assure that we weren't allowing, and that's not the word, that we were careful in allowing our sponsors and the person that's overseeing to be able to do their job and not have to worry about spending things, because a parent wanted them to buy this item instead of that item.
If you think I'm nothing about a parent dictating a particular thing unless they do that specific contribution thing. This was a general over transparency, visibility, but because I know everything has to be accounted for anyways, the question was, is there an easy way for us to simply say, once a year they'll put out a report to the parents of the organization? That was the goal and target of the conversation that we had, and that was the intent, not to dictate an individual spending by a parent for a group activity. That was never, if that's what you took from that, that was not my intent.
Okay, well, thank you
And
for
one of the-
clarification.
One of the things that a parent can do if they don't, they can call the hotline, and if they think there's an issue, they can call it internal audit, and they've done that. And then internal audit goes back and researches and goes through that. Or if anybody asks for an open records request, what did they spend? We can pull up that data and then go to the bookkeeper, get all the invoices, as opposed to doing them for 1,500 different organizations.
Yeah, I would say, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, my experience of being a parent of children involved in, booster clubs and whatnot, is the sponsor typically says, we're going to do a fundraiser for this. So and then they may come back and say, okay, well, we made this much money, and so we have this much extra money, and we can go now do this. So my experience through my kids has always been that sponsor has been transparent because they want the parents to donate.
Agreed.
So they want them to participate. So they are very clear about what they want that for. So I don't know.
What? Yeah, look, y'all, in the end, right now, we just don't have a system that does it easy. We looked at Susie in Susie's spirit trying to say yes to it is looking inside her own office. Can they prepare the report? And it's just cumbersome and laborious. And I don't want to overwork the sponsors that Julie sees or coaches that Kelly oversees. And I certainly don't want to put a burden on finance right now because, well, they're already shorthanded. Now, if we're looking down the road and a new system or something, that's, I think, something we need to keep in mind is, does it have the ability to produce something that would be relevant to a parent that gives them the answer to the question they would naturally ask without having to seek a whole lot more information.
Going back to the idea that Ms. Wiki, because a lot of the modern systems have the ability, obviously there's, to quickly generate a report and just say, I want this and be done. But obviously there's different systems used for different reasons. So the reason to have the conversation. So appreciate the information on that one.
Okay.
And I had one more. Well,
okay.
Do you have the HAA? I know we had the conversation last time, and we're talking about the general thing as we're going through this whole process and the good governance. So I guess looking back at what is proposed to us as an X is the exact same as the EHA Local A. So I guess my real two questions, which is the exact same language as the EH legal. The local and legal use the exact same 5 sentences, and then our X. But how did we get to an X for using the exact same language as the TASB local A, and why wasn't that presented to us for EHAA, which is the curriculum stuff?
Yeah, wait, what page are you on?
Yeah, what page?
Sorry, I'm here. I'm on page. It was it's 60.
Are you looking at 62?
62? I think that's correct.
I think it's A. I think the X has the strike through it. It has it on mine anyway.
Okay, because okay, when I'm seeing, I grabbed the regular local from another place, TASB, and it's 1 through 5, and ours looks.
I have X written through. I have X crossed through, and A is the proposed. Yes.
Because it's
okay.
Oops.
On page 62.
That's what mine shows too.
Okay, then I guess my question is, why does ours look different than other ones that are 1 through 5 and look in different? I looked at our previous one, and it had that, and it looked like they tried to align it with what we had, but I have another one here from, it doesn't really matter, it's local ISD, and it was 1 through 5, and it looked just like the legal. So I'm trying to figure out how we got to ours to look so different.
And where did
Where did you pull yours from, Mr.
Hilliard?
This one happens to be Cibolo shirts, but there's just 1 through 5 in a straight order, which is the local A. And so we had this conversation last time. I thought we were talking about it being a local, not an A from TASB. Did I? I see X on this one here, but when we did it last time, it was, if I remember correctly, we had that conversation that it was a local, and that's what I was trying to understand what we were doing specifically locally that was different than what was recommended in doing that. So you're saying this is the...
Mr. Jimenez, did something change between first and second reading that I'm not aware of?
No, sir, not that I'm aware of.
Okay. So our formatting is different than...
I'm sorry.
Because I looked at a few other districts too, and they all had A,
Yeah.
which is what ours is.
Yeah, I was looking at all
showing
the
as-
formatting ours was different, which was what threw me off, and that's why I was asking some of the questions last time. I'm trying to understand. I was under the impression we did something different.
Well, when you say formatting, are you referencing the fact that sometimes everything gets jumbled around?
No, just like this one, all of them had 1 through 5 that I saw. I saw a couple that had 1 through 5, two different
Correct.
districts. All we have is 1, 2, 3, and that's it. And the other two districts I happened to come across both had 1 through 5 in numerical order.
And did they show an A at the bottom or an X?
Like I looked at,
An A.
I just pulled one up and
And then I found another one that's an X, but they had the 1 through 5, and that's why it's throwing me off. Because to me, I wanted to know why we were doing something different locally, or why we have this disparity, I guess would be my question. Because obviously this local actually is just a copy of the legal language from pages 10 and 11 of EHA.
Because I'm taking a look at the first EHAA, and then I'm taking a look at the 62, which would be any proposed changes we would make. And they mirror one another, correct?
So here's what I'm thinking is
You
happening.
can pass it on, Dr. Wright. These are two different
So it's
ISDs that
page
both have
62
1 through
and then
5,
what
1
was the
through
other one?
5.
Okay, so here's what's happening.
Are you seeing?
I can see, so on what we have in front of us, if you want to look at this,
Just-
we actually have 1 through 5, but we're missing we have 1, 2, and 3, but in between there's a couple of lines that should be the 4 and 5, or
that
3
were-
and
but
5, or whatever. it
Yeah,
is.
but it's just throwing me off is because the formatting. I initially went on the conversation last time
Yeah.
for a different reason about adding some local stuff to reflect the
Yeah,
community.
I guess I don't remember the formatting question. I do
It wasn't the
remember the other stuff, but
Yeah.
it has the same 5 bullet
That's an
points.
X, but the first 5 are the same, and that's just an A. They
And
copied the A.
It looks like we have
Because it's all the same language, but it's in a very different format, which was, I'm trying to figure out how we.
We have a 1 and a 2, and then what should be 3 doesn't have
So
a
I guess
number.
I was expecting.
No, I see it.
4 is 3, and then
Yeah, I
5
wonder
is
why.
Do we have a copy of the original TASB?
Yeah, it's
proposed
right here.
LHA?
That's it, right
That
here.
is it?
This
So
is it.
Yeah.
It's on page 15.
Then I'm just trying to figure out how ours got so.
No, I don't. Well, but it's only 1, 2, and 3.
But, so in the examples, and I saw some from other ISDs as well, that they have, let me see if I can explain this. So
Was
where we,
theirs X?
so where we have they're A.
They're A's.
They were A's. And so where they have a 1, we have a 1. Where they have a 2, we have a 2. But that next paragraph that
Right.
starts, the SHAC recommendation must comply with instructional content, that is their number 3, but we don't have a number on ours. And then where we have number 3, which says the SHAC shall present its recommendations to the board at a
Yeah,
public meeting.
and number 5 being after the board ensures.
Correct, and ours isn't numbered.
Right, and it's a straight copy from EHA Legal, actually. They have a 1, 2, 3 with some sub-bullets. The local is a copy, which it's a different conversation about
Yeah, that's.
this, but,
I
so
don't know,
the
because-
formatting is one thing, but the other piece, I think the more important question Mr. Byron had too, is the question about how the board is going to ensure it meets the standards and law was the question we had discussed last meeting, and how that's gonna be, how does that look? I don't know if we ever had a chance to follow up on that.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Jimenez, I think you.
Well,
No.
I'll look, how we're going to do is we're going to seek the advice of the attorney to make certain that it is. I mean, ultimately, that's the only way that we can prove it. I mean,
Well, and I guess, there was no, looking back through the House bill and education code, I mean, they don't give any clarification as to what the word ensure means. And
Right.
so, I mean, I guess at that point, all we can do is say, here's what they have gone through the SHAC, here's what our legal representative has advised us of. And that's all we really have to hang our hat on, according to everything I've read. I mean, from the state on down, they haven't clarified any of that.
No, it's just that then we, the board, are accountable for that.
Correct, and
compliance piece,
that
that's-
was the whole point
Yep.
of the House bill, which was to put it back on the board to make sure that we ensure that that's correct. At least that's my interpretation of what they were telling us to do.
Everything, yeah, back to the board and accountability, that's how I understood it as well, just that those words aren't clearly defined how we're gonna meet that requirement.
welcome to education legislation. I mean, that's honestly what we do a lot of time is trying to figure out that's why legislators pass something and then they push it to the commissioner to figure it out and interpret it. I foresee in the next legislative session, we'll get some more clarity around this. I think they're going to do some pieces to it, but I mean, honestly, from everything I've read, and I'm recalling all this now and visiting with our legal counsel, there's nothing out there. There's no checklist or rubric or something to be able to say, okay, this. There is what they have for us, and we got to make sure that we've done our due diligence, that SHAC has seen it all and understood it, and the recommendation comes from there.
And I guess what Mr. Jimenez, I believe at the last meeting, sort of gave me some comfort level that there'd be a rubric matrix.
Right.
So here's what the law requires and here's what we're proposing.
Correct, Mr. Byer. I use the word rubric, and I think really a checklist would probably be a better term to use. And if we're looking at what the policy language is asking for, the law is asking for instance, the adoption of a resolution to convene that SHAC, did we do that? Check. You know, the opportunity for there to be parent meetings, check. And so we'll look through the specific law, which is now 1525, which is now placed here on this local, and we could provide that checklist to ensure that those things occurred and when they occurred. That's what we can do that. I don't know if that meets what y'all are looking for with the insuring, but that's what we certainly can do on our end.
I'd say I don't know that we have any other, at least my opinion, we don't have any other way to ensure that other than through our own legal counsel and through the SHAC's due diligence and making sure that they're abiding by what they're charged to do, which is the law.
Right, those pieces, right,
Yeah.
of specifically of House Bill 1525.
And then at some point, will we be able to do, before we get to this point, when it comes time, because I know there's reviews going on, get copies of the curriculums for the health and any changes to any of the programs, so that we have time, since it's our responsibility today to ensure it, so we can at least look through the text and have an idea of what we're actually approving.
Yeah,
Going forward, yes.
For
as we-
human sexuality or
for health, any of the stuff, because if we're adopting curriculum, or approving curriculum.
Correct.
We obviously should be able to have access to, have time to review it as well.
Yes,
Is that
sir.
fair?
Oh, it'll be
You would
provided
re-
to
you
us
would
to
get that
review.
in advance.
Well, before, I mean, like a month or two at least in advance. Or
I mean-
not 3 days prior, because there's no way to go through a couple hundred page schedule
Sure.
in 3 days.
Well, the best I can tell you is Once they vote, we could let you know. I mean, we're at the disposal of SHAC to say, here is our recommendation to the board. Now, once they've made it, because I have no idea what they're going to recommend, once they make it, we can tell you, here's what it is at that given point. And can we get you copies to review? I'm assuming we
Right,
can.
and those copies are available right now on the website, so we certainly can offer anybody that wants to look at it to review the different publishers.
Is it all
that are out
online
there.
right now?
I
Mr.
believe so.
Jimenez?
Jennifer's all online right now, or
She here?
she is?
Jennifer's there.
They're not all the ones that we're reviewing because of copyright.
Correct.
Ours, but they are still on campuses. We have not picked any of them up, but they're on campuses, and we do still all have them at sports park. We're talking about two different things. The ones that we're looking at adopting are on campuses and at sports park. Our current HSAE curriculum is all online, and it always has been.
Okay, yeah, well, I'm sure we could already ask you, Majors. Do you mind coming and repeating that just for the microphone so everyone can hear it, so it's recorded?
Come on up
We heard you, but
Yeah.
thank you very much. It's good.
Okay, so currently the materials that are up for review and for adoption, those are still on the campuses, but they aren't necessarily all online. Some of them are digital-only resources, so they are online, but they are still on the campuses and they're still available at Northeast Sports Park to review because SHAC has not made their full recommendations for all of them. We didn't get through them all, so we still have those in our possession. Anyone's welcome to come review those.
And Ms. Aguilar, those are for health and PE.
Those are health and PE. And they're not specifically for the HSAE right now because we were waiting on that part. Those now are going to be pulled out and they are companion text. So we're really looking right now at adopting everything that's not part of the opt-in TEKS where you have to have the permission slips. If we're talking about HSAE, and that's in my brain right now because parent previews are starting this week, that current curriculum that has been approved by SHAC is already currently online and always is online. So it's available anytime parents want, and we are starting those parent previews this week and next week, and that's all posted online and has been sent out as well. Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, so any other questions or comments about update 118? No? Okay, so do I have a motion to approve the second and final reading of the above listed local policies included in update 118?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Byer. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the motion carries. Item 2, possible action regarding revision to board policy BDD local. Dr. Micah?
It really says me, but.
I know. It's probably me.
You know, I think you all had a chance to visit about your questions on with it. So I believe the proposal is still in here if there's anything
Yeah, I'm trying to get to that page.
that you all wanted to add to it.
84?
80, yeah, I'm just trying to get there.
Or if based off of what you have
Okay.
discussed, if you're comfortable in it.
Yeah. Does anybody have
With
any
the way it is
questions or
listed now.
comments about that BDD?
Do we just need to verbalize the standing report out
you-
here? That the intent is that we'll get a standing report every quarter, whatever the conversation, that's on.
From the attorney?
From the attorney.
Mhm.
That's
Okay.
the intent of the board.
Right. Okay, so do I have a motion to approve the revised board policy BDD local as presented?
So moved?
Thank you, Ms. Winkley. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Hilliard. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, the motion carries. Item B, resolutions. 1, possible action regarding board resolution on damaged medical device reimbursement. Dr. Micah.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. So this is rather an unusual request, and I want to give you some context as to why I'm coming to you this evening. So throughout the school district, we have paraprofessionals and things like that that work with some of our more needy children. So they're in our ALE classrooms or they're in a behavior unit. And, you know, for some of them, you know, flailing arms and things like that, that's just part of who they are. And sometimes what happens is our people are doing great work with them and they get into close proximity. And so in one case, a child's arm comes back, hit a paraprofessional in the face, not on purpose, truly, purely on accident as part of just their disability, and broke the glasses. Well, currently, we tell the paraprofessional, I'm sorry, go buy new glasses. Well, this came to my attention, and I started researching it because that just did not sit well with me. And so I sat with the legal counsel and went through it because there is some immunity piece to it. And so what the resolution really is giving me the authority to start looking at a process in which people can apply for reimbursement of medical devices that are broken during the scope of their work. So in the case where that paraprofessional is hit in the face by a child, her glasses are broken, that there's a process in which she can apply to the district for reimbursement or some help with buying a set of new glasses. Because look, I'm a softie on this, but y'all, I mean, good gracious, those folks are doing such hard work in those classrooms, and it just doesn't sit with me well to say, paraprofessional who chooses to work in there with some of these kids because you have a calling for it, and on accident a child broke your glasses, or maybe it's an insulin pump, or it's a medical device, right? And then we just say, too bad. You got to figure this out. So what I'm coming to this evening is for your approval to a resolution to allow us the process in setting something up to where people that have something like that happen, that we have a way to take a look at it and see if the district cannot help folks with purchasing something like that new again. All right? So that's, bless you. So that's what this resolution is about. Because so this did happen at a campus recently. That paraprofessional did not have the money to purchase glasses. The teacher in the classroom bought the glasses for them and sent me an email. And it really started me down this track of I cannot believe we don't. So I started understanding why. And what I said to Mr. Lopez is, I really think this is something we need to be able to take a look at. Now, this isn't. This is truly within the scope, and we'd have to work it out. I don't have every detail for you this evening. That resolution is to grant me the authority to figure out a process. And if you want to hear about it when we're done, I'd be absolutely more than happy to bring it back to share it with you. So with that, any questions?
So is another option for them to use insurance, but it's still subject to co-pays or deductibles?
If they have insurance.
If they have insurance.
Ms. Williams, I mean, some of our folks don't have it.
Okay. I think it's a wonderful gesture. I'm very happy to see this.
Any other questions? All right, so do I have a motion to approve the resolution as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Do I have a second?
Second?
Thank you, Ms. Winkley. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Item C, Business Services. 1, possible action regarding consideration and approval of an order authorizing the remarketing of Northeast Independent School District variable rate and limited tax refunding bonds, Series 2017.
Yes, Madam
Philip?
President. Before I start, I want to thank Stephanie Leby. She's with Norton Rose Fulbright. She helped prepare the paperwork for all the next 4. And also Michelle Aragon with Hilltop Securities was also a big help. So if there's any detailed questions you might need or want to ask, I have them here. But basically the first one, we're going to remarket 2017 bonds this coming summer. So that's what this parameter order is for.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions about this?
I'm still new, obviously,
Yes,
my
sir.
first year, so I just want to make sure, yes, ma'am, I do, sorry. This is just the normal process, and then this does help the taxpayers because obviously
Yes,
we're
sir.
doing this to do, the big picture question is, each of these is the normal process. We do this over time.
Yes, sir.
Versus right now, because everyone's worried right now with inflation and lots of stuff going on in the economy.
Right.
But this is part of our normal
Yes, sir.
process to remarket these over time.
Yes,
Is that
sir.
correct?
And we usually don't go unless we know that we're going to be able to reduce the...
Yes,
Right.
yes, sir.
It's all-
Yeah.
usually it's the benefit of the taxpayer and the district,
Yes, and this is just giving us the ability to go out and do that. But if the market tanks or anything happens come summer, then we would just keep. Now, some of these are 1-year variables that we have to redo. We might either fix out or do a variable again. So.
No, that's good. I just wanted to make sure for the community, everyone realizes there's a specific reason why we're doing it. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Anybody else have questions? Do I have a motion to adopt an order authorizing the remarketing of Northeast Independent School District variable rate and limited tax refunding bonds, Series 2017, pursuant to a delegated sale?
So moved.
Ooh, Mr. Byer, do I have a second?
Second.
Ms. Winkley, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, the motion carries. Item 2, possible action regarding consideration and approval of an order authorizing the remarketing of Northeast Independent School District variable rate unlimited tax school building bonds, Series 2013B.
Yes, ma'am. This is to remarket Series 2013B.
Okay.
And come summer.
Okay, any questions about that? Sorry, I'm trying to get to the action item. Okay, yeah. Do I have a motion to adopt an order authorizing the remarketing of Northeast Independent School District variable rate unlimited tax school building bonds, Series 2013B, pursuant to a delegated sale?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Hilliard. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the motion carries. Item 3, possible action regarding consideration and approval of an order authorizing the issuance of Northeast Independent School District variable rate unlimited tax school building and/or refunding bonds.
Yes, Madam President. This order is for us to go out next month to pay off our commercial paper program and to to issue the last $14 million from the 2015 bond approval.
Okay. Any questions about this one? All right. Do I have a motion to adopt an order authorizing the issuance by the Northeast Independent School District of its variable rate unlimited tax school building and/or refunding bonds in one or more series as designated by purpose and series pursuant to a delegated sale?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Winkley. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Hilliard. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. Item 4, possible action regarding consideration and approval of an order authorizing the issuance of Northeast Independent School District fixed rate unlimited tax school building and/or refunding bonds.
Yes,
Same
ma'am.
thing.
Yes, ma'am. This is the fixing of it instead of a variable rate.
Okay. All right. Sorry, I'm scrolling as quickly as I can. I should print these, shouldn't I?
I've got hand cramp.
Oh, okay. Do I have a motion to adopt an order authorizing the issuance by the Northeast Independent School District of its fixed-rate unlimited tax school building and/or refunding bonds in one or more series as designated by purpose and series pursuant to a delegated sale?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Winkley. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Hilliard. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, the motion carries. Item D, consent. 1, business services. A, 50,000 purchases.
Thank y'all.
B, oh yes, thank you for being here, I'm sorry. B, bid items. 2, operations. A, district-wide environmental services indefinite delivery quantity bid authorization approval. B, ESSER 3 funds HVAC unit, ventilator, and energy recovery unit replacement project bid package C, 5 campuses bid award approval. C, ESSER 3 funds Madison High School central plant chiller replacement project bid award approval. 3, minutes from February 2022. 4, end of consent. Do I have a board member wishing to pull an item from consent?
Madam Chair, I'd like to pull D1A, $50,000 purchases.
Okay, anybody else?
And I'd like to pull D2C, ESSER 3 funds Madison High School central plant.
Okay, anybody else? Do I have a motion to approve consent without D1A and D2C?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Winkley. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the motion carries. All right, Ms. Huey, D1A.
Mr. Virel, this just seems like a lot more items than we usually see under this item. I'm just wondering why.
Good evening. I'm Valerie Rada, the Executive Director of Procurement. So throughout the year, we bring you the list, and as we reach those prior board approvals, we go back to the campuses and departments and say, okay, we have this vendor, you've already reached a board approval. Before we approve another PO that's going to go over what was already approved, what do you plan on spending? So this list is to get us through the end of the year. And basically, we're looking at every vendor that's over 50,000 and that we've already taken to the board, and we look at each purchase and we're looking at every board approval to make sure that we're staying within those amounts. So it's just a matter of trying to be a little bit more transparent for the board. Normally, you guys would only get one list at the beginning of the year, and that would be the end of it. But this year, I decided to kind of bring it to you guys on a regular basis so you can see what we're spending the money on, which vendors, and this way we also wouldn't hold back any POs that were over 50,000. Because if we were to bring every single PO that's over 50,000, we have the potential to hold that purchase for up to a month, because it could be, after a board meeting already. And we kind of don't want to hinder that process and, hinder the learning for the students and what they need.
And Ms. Huey, I'm going to go back. Mr. Hilliard, you and I had this discussion a while back, right?
Yep.
So this is something Valerie has done differently. The way that used to get done is there could be a bid or a request for 90,000, and what was done is it was put in as, for you all to see, as 300,000, even though really it was only going to be about 90. What Valerie is doing is it's taking a little bit more work, but it's a lot better for you all to see this is really what's happening, rather than, and I think one of the examples Mr. Hilliard did was maybe cookies.
The cookies ones we
right?
had.
Because it is. I mean, to somebody out there, it's like, holy smoke. And so what Valerie is doing, it's the same way as she added the notes and pieces in, is to really help you all understand what this really is. So she's doing a great job down there. And she's doing things a little bit different. That's why I think you're surprised by seeing it, but that's the welcome to the Valerie way.
I appreciate the information. That wasn't the problem.
and,
It's
you
just
know,
normally
if
we'll see maybe 2 or 3 or something
Right.
like that.
Right, so we're just trying to plan ahead. I ask all the campuses and departments, hey, what do you plan on spending for the next, 2-3 months? This way we don't have to keep coming to the board every month with the same vendor. We try to get them to plan ahead.
Now, that notes column is particularly great. I like
I
that.
really like the
Yeah.
notes.
Yes.
Thank you.
So thank you for
If
that.
there's anything else, we can add, or if you need anything else, just let us know and we'll try to see what we can do.
It looks great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, do I have a motion to approve D1A?
So move.
Thank you, Ms. Huey. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Byer. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Okay, Mr. Byer, D2C.
Yes, if I'm reading this correctly, we have an approved budget of 2.2 million, and the awarded bid cost is 2.9 million. And I was just curious, 2 questions. One, do we have a way to cover the overage on that? Is that coming out of the current bond funding or some other source? And I guess 2, because it is, tied to ESSER funds, do we have to change anything in what's been reported to them to make sure that if it's over something we approved, that we have to amend any
Sure, Mr.
documents?
Sure, Mr. Byer. Let me let Gary Sullivan, Executive Director of Construction Management Engineering,
It's the
address
only
this.
reason I asked the question, so I could see Mr. Sullivan tonight.
Good evening. Mr. Byer, to answer your question, we have sufficient contingency funds in the ESSER account to cover the overages in this project, the $725,000.
And I noticed that there were 5 alternates, and I guess we only had, or the 2 alternates that got accepted, are they critical to
Yes,
the
sir.
operation of what's happening in the base bid?
Absolutely. We really need to do the 2 alternates. The other ones are more nice to have, not
But we don't have
absolutely
to.
necessary.
Okay. And then we don't, with the ESSER funding, we don't have to go back and amend anything in what's been approved so far?
No, sir.
To update that. Just want to make sure we don't get out of compliance with.
We're in good shape on the ESSER funding.
Okay.
We sufficiently budgeted enough money overall in the ESSER accounts to cover the pluses and minuses we've seen in the bids so far to date.
Good. right,
And,
that's
and
all I
Mr.
have.
Byer, just so you know, there's somebody that Dan has that works for him that oversees ESSER.
Yes,
So
sir, and-
make
and-
sure that we're not out of compliance.
And every time we do an amendment, we resubmit, and if anything changes amongst us, we resubmit an amendment. So the state allows us to do that, and then we post it on the website for any changes for the taxpayers to see.
Great, thank you. And I see Mr. Boblin in the audience, so
Yeah, I was going
he's
to
got some
recognize
work to get
Mr.
going
Mark
on.
Bobbitt from Marksman. He's who we're recommending tonight for your consideration.
Yep, perfect.
We
Thank
only
you.
have 2 projects left to bid in Esther. We have the Cerna HVAC unit replacements, and we have the Genetec conversion for the district access control system. That's all we have left to bid.
Great.
And we have a good surplus right now.
All right, thank you.
Good.
Thank you for that correction as well. Appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
For
Thank you.
clarification.
Appreciate you catching that, Mr.
Yeah.
Hilliard.
All right, any other questions for? Did you want to introduce, or do we have other contractors here?
No, ma'am, just Mr.
Okay.
Bobbitt.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Byer, do you want to make a motion?
Move that we approve item, I know, do I have to read the whole thing?
Can you just say D2C?
D2C, ESSER 3 funds, Madison High School Central Plant Chiller Replacement Project Bid Award approval.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Winkley. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, the motion carries. All right, item 11, reports. A, interim financial and management reports. B, awarded bid report. Those have been provided for you. Item 12, discussion and possible action regarding board members' request for items to be placed on a future agenda and our request for reports from the administration. Do I have a board member wishing to request something?
I do.
Ms. Huey?
Yeah, I would like to see if we could go back to getting a report on the open records request that the district receives. We used to receive one a while back. It's been a while now. I know there's been a lot of changes in personnel and who's in charge and everything else. But I think it would give us some real good information into what our community is looking for, some transparency for us as trustees.
So the open records requests?
Mhm.
Okay. What,
It used to be it was like an Excel spreadsheet, and it was the dates, who was requesting, what they were requesting. There was more information on it too. It seems like who was responsible for responding, and
okay.
the cost and things like that.
Dr. Mitchell, Dr. Mitchell, what do you have, I guess, for how you track PIA requests?
Sure. We have I guess it's a homemade system that's been around since 2014. It's a database that was open to the public where they could just go enter the information and it would generate an open records request number automatically. And that information that you mentioned, the date that it was requested, what the request was, all that is captured in that system. Currently, though, because of hacks and bad things that are happening out there, that system's not open to the public. So we have a Google Doc that they can fill out, and then that information is transferred to a Google Sheet, a spreadsheet that we have, and then we have to manually enter that into the system. But all that data is captured that you mentioned, and I believe there is a report that can be generated that has that information.
Without too much.
Correct.
Okay. I don't want to put any burden on anyone. I just feel like it might be some good information in these times right now to know what our community is asking for, that we could hopefully respond to.
Okay.
So,
I'm going to ask a few more questions. How often are you wanting that?
I can only go on past history. We used to get it about once a month.
Okay, so on like board meeting night, you would want it included in your packet?
It could be just a simple email. That's what we used to get, was just like we get our interim financials and everything else. Just a simple email with the.
Peggy, is that something that we can include as we send out like the agenda packet, to just include a report, whatever Dr. Mitchell can generate? Okay.
Yeah, like the interim financial and management reports, the awarded bid report. Yeah.
So we need to vote on that.
So I would like to move to request a report from the administration on open records request.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries.
Thank you, Dr. Micah. Thank you,
Madam
Dr.
President,
Martin.
can I request one as well?
Oh, sorry.
No, it's fine. Just make sure
Yeah.
I don't want to step in. Mr. Breyer, did you want to go first or you have to say something? Okay. I wanted to put it to the board. Mr. Jared, if I remember correctly, last year we approved about $15 million in training, one-time training for teachers, new teachers. Does that sound familiar? Last year, about 15 million. We were doing outside training for teachers.
The PLC training?
Yeah,
is
and all
what
that
you're
stuff.
referring to? Yes, sir.
So what I was hoping to capture, because we're going to have to relook what didn't work. So kind of the number of teachers trained and the effectiveness of it, so that as we approach this next budget season, we're figuring out what those new approaches that did work as it comes to the board and didn't. Y'all do the day-to-day, but as we're approving funds, if we're going to have to approve another 10 or 15 million in outside training versus, I know you talked about doing some inside training, but just so we have a big picture, how many trained, the effectiveness, how y'all measured effectiveness, things like that.
We can. I will tell you that this year is the last year of that cohort. So
Okay.
every campus has went through the initial
Okay.
training. And so internally, we have an in-house trainer that will continue the updates for newer staff as they come on board. So all campuses have went through that initial training. But I mean, we can tell you how many have been trained. The effectiveness sometimes is qualitative over quantitative.
Okay.
And so to speak in absolutes would be negligible. on my part.
Understood. I just didn't know what metrics y'all were using to ascertain
Sure.
that. And then, so this is the last year we are not going to be funding outside training on that
I mean, we
scale.
still have outside training because.
But
we
not
have
on
to
that
use
scale,
title-
15 million
Not to
probably.
that scale. That's correct, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
So how would you measure the effectiveness?
That's my point. It would have to be qualitative and quantitative to a degree, but the qualitative side is the effectiveness of teacher feedback, survey, impact of students, observation. As we bring forth the data from our STAR results, our MAP data, that tells us if our teachers are being effective in the classroom. Because we're not a factory building cars and widgets and different things, we're dealing with kids. It's pretty agile in how our practices are. But at the end of the day, we still have to create some type of qualitative research as well as the fact that we have data to support our actions.
Right. Okay.
But I don't know how to bring a report.
Yeah,
Well, that may not be, that's what my question, that's why I was trying to fill if there was a way y'all were tracking data or getting feedback from teachers to figure out if there was some sort of mechanism to do that. And there may not be because of the nature of it. But the bigger issue, I think, is, okay, there was we'll look at it in the budget coming up. But I didn't want to wait till budget season to ask for that question.
Yes, sir.
If there was a question, okay.
Okay.
Then we may not need to do that for this particular.
Okay. Mr. Bauer, did you have something? Oh, okay. Ms. Williams? Anything else? Okay. Item 13, adjournment, and the time is 8:42. Thank y'all for being here. Enjoy the rest of your evening.